Whether reason will prevail depends only partly upon us. We must hope and strive for the best. We must prepare for the worst.
I'm Nathan Kiker. Welcome to our podcast, Clearer Than Truth. I'm glad to be joined by my co-host, George Bogdan.
The wisdom of former Secretary of State Dean Acheson inspires our episodes. We emphasize clarity while examining the intricate global issues of today for a diverse audience.
In a world where time is limited, we distill complex ideas, making them not just comprehensible, but in Acheson's words, clearer than truth. Thanks for joining this special episode of Clearer Than Truth. Today, we have a special episode unpacking last night's U.S. presidential election, in which Donald Trump defeated Vice President Kamala Harris, earning a second term as president. Matthew Klein, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Great to be back.
So, did anything happen last night in the U.S. presidential election?
Gee, I don't know. It was only an all-nighter for me, for the most part. So, boy, what a night. I think we had discussed the last time I was on some of the possible outcomes and what a win would look like for Trump. And I feel pretty good about the way that I made that kind of prediction. It seems like the path that Trump got to victory was in line with what most of the polls seem to indicate would be his path to victory. And so all in all, I can't say that anybody at my organization is too surprised by the outcome.
Remind us what you had said would be his path to victory when you're on a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, basically, we assumed he would get particularly strong numbers with Latino voters. It looked like Harris was going to lose ground with them regardless, even if she was to pull out a victory. But the numbers that he was managed to get were on the higher end of what we thought was in the realm of possibility, which is that Harris ended up winning them by single digits. Our polling average had her winning them by about 13 or 14, so not a huge change from that. And he held his own among white, non-college educated voters. And the most important story, I think, was beyond the racial dynamic, was that he really held his own with white college educated voters. He didn't really lose that much ground with them. And that was sort of the Harris path. I mean, everybody knew she was going to lose ground with minority voters, so you have to make that up somewhere. She wasn't going to make it up with non-college educated whites, and she was looking to the suburbs, and they just, quite frankly, didn't come home for her.
We saw a 33-point swing from 2020 when Joe Biden was on the ticket within just 4 years amongst Latino men. How did something that dramatic happen? How did he do it? 33 points.
That's
and
right.
I think there's been a bigger shift in recent history. I could be wrong.
I don't know if there's been a bigger shift, certainly not among Latinos. I mean, this is obviously the most competitive that they've been in a long time, maybe since 2004. George W. Bush was pretty good at getting the Latino vote in his reelection. How does that happen? Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I think it was largely just a messaging fail on the part of the Democratic Party. Clearly, whatever they were selling didn't seem to be resonating. I think one other aspect that really needs to be discussed is just the economy. This was not the regionalized shifts, trends that we saw in 2020 and in 2022. These weren't state specific. This was everywhere. This was Trump making gains in Loudoun County, Virginia, and in the Rio Grande Valley. He won Miami-Dade County. He did better in Detroit. Like, this is not the sort of victory that you would necessarily expect from a competitive sort of national environment, certain issues swinging for certain groups. The economy seems to have just affected everybody. And I think that was the number one issue. Exit polls showed that. And I don't put a ton of stock into exit polls, but in this case, it was a decisive enough number one for most people that I think that matters. When people are paying more for their basic essentials at the end of the day, and the president of the United States, the incumbent president, has a 41% approval rating on a good day, it's just, I mean, it's a miracle Harris, quite frankly, only lost Wisconsin by a point because, you would normally expect a candidate to do significantly worse than that.
George, jump in. What would you like to know?
I'm just interested in your thinking about how we got to a place where it was so unpredictable what was going to take place. And what I mean by that is, I think if you were to ask people at noon yesterday what the outcome was going to be, they couldn't have fathomed this outcome. So, I know that folks in your office probably were, more on the money, and I'm not disputing that. I'm just wondering, are we in an age when data is itself polarized and people are kind of in their rabbit hole and don't want to deal with that? Or how do you rectify the two kind of?
Well, for the most part, I have to say, I think that polling averages held up very well. Individual polls, I don't know how. I mean, obviously, a lot of attention was given to the Ann Selzer poll over the weekend, which ended up being way, way off, orders of magnitude incorrect. So I think it's important to note, I mean, going into this election, the polls were close. The New York Times Siena batch of polls that were released over the weekend pointed to Trump doing well in Arizona. Everybody seemed to acknowledge that was going to be his best state. It certainly looks like it's shaping up that way. The blue wall was not at all a lock. It looked like Pennsylvania was tied. Michigan was tied. So this was a close race. I don't know that there are many people who weren't expecting it to be close. Now, as for why, it all ended up going in Trump's direction, that's just generally what happens in these kinds of races. Usually we have, toss-up columns, and we have, we put certain races in there that we just don't feel comfortable saying that either party has an advantage in. And they almost never break 50-50, depending on the cycle. The nature of these toss-up races is that they sort of all, with a few exceptions, but for the most part, the winning candidate will get around 70 to 80% of those toss-up races. In this case, Trump got all 7. In 2016, he did the same thing, and in 2012, Obama got them all. I mean, it's not surprising that in a close race, all of these results would sort of track. And the race, obviously we can get into this, but the race for the House is still much closer. And the Senate, obviously is going to Republicans, but there are a number of races there that have yet to be determined. But I think this outcome is just, is it slightly on the more Republican end of what was expected? Yeah, but it's not a shock. This is not like 2016 when people really, really didn't see it coming.
Let's dive a bit into the House and the Senate. Let's start with the Senate. Obviously, Republicans took control. Why did that happen, and were there any races in particular that surprised you?
Well, it happened because the Democrats had a tough map. They had done very well in 2018. That was the mid-year backlash to Trump. They won a bunch of seats there. Republicans were guaranteed to pick up in West Virginia. They got that one. They got Ohio, which was, I believe, $500 million went into the general election in the state of Ohio. Only for that race, Sherrod Brown did manage to outrun Kamala Harris by a pretty impressive margin, but with Trump winning by 11 points, it's just not the kind of number you can expect to outperform. John Tester in Montana did even better. He outran her by 13 points. Same thing, when a race is going so heavily toward one party these days, there just aren't that many voters willing to split their tickets. And what we were seeing was in the home stretch, the blue wall Senate races were starting to really track with the presidential race, and so that. We moved Wisconsin into toss-up, Michigan into toss-up, Pennsylvania became a toss-up. We kept Arizona and Nevada in lean Democrat. Arizona does look like it will go to the Democrats. Nevada was, one of probably the biggest surprise of the night for me on the Senate front, just because it does look like Jackie Rosen, who at one point was posting persistent double-digit advantages over Sam Brown, her opponent, well into September and even early October, is now in an absolute nail-biter that's going to come down to the last remaining votes in Clark County. So, it was just a brutal map, I think, is number one. The Democrats down ballot all outran Kamala Harris, so clearly there are some Democrats capable of doing better in these states. But when the national headwinds are this strong, it's just really hard to overcome that.
I want to take a look specifically at the Michigan Senate race, where it looks like Alyssa Slotkin, I think they just called it for within the last hour,
That's
is
right.
projected to win. How was she able to outperform Kamala Harris by as much as she did in the state?
Well, Slotkin is an interesting candidate. She is a moderate Democrat. She represented the state's 7th district, which is a very competitive seat in the Lansing area that flipped to Republicans last night. She left that open. She has a unique background in the CIA. She has an actual moderate voting record. She's definitely in the more moderate wing of the House Democratic Caucus, which is not necessarily true of some of the other candidates who were running in other important competitive races. She, took the race very seriously from the beginning. Democrats generally feel good about Michigan. They felt very good about Michigan in 2022. She was not concerned about, trying to. She was focused. She was completely focused on getting the voters that she needed, and Republicans had a good recruit here in Mike Rogers, who was former FBI, and also former U.S. congressman, represented the same area, Lansing, very swingy part of Michigan. But they didn't put a ton of money into this race until the very, very end, when it became clear that it was tightening as the presidential race was tightening. And I think ultimately a little bit more money in a race like this probably could have done the trick, actually, in tarnishing Slotkin's reputation a little bit more. She'll only win by, probably less than half a point in the end. And that is probably a number that the GOP could have made up with greater investment. But at this point, it's a done deal. She'll win. And she managed to outperform Harris a little bit in places like Dearborn, where the Arab American vote, Green Party candidates, Jill Stein took some 33% of the vote in some of those precincts. So Slotkin just did a better job of keeping the Democratic coalition together and appealing to some of those suburbanites that Harris wasn't able to get.
We also saw, and George, feel free to jump in as well, but we also saw a ton of outside money spent in her race, as we did with the Ohio Senate race. You mentioned $500 million in Ohio. We saw big organizations such as some of the crypto PACs playing in these races. What role, if any, did they play in determining some of the winners, meaning the big outside organizations?
I mean, I think that these tight ones, they played a lot in a race like Montana, probably less so. I mean, I think some of these races were baked, from the beginning. But I do think it's worth having a conversation about advertising, ad investments, how much those things even matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, if you think about it, right, a state like New Jersey and New York shifted enormously, right, toward Donald Trump last night. That is intriguing because neither candidate ran any ads there, so that may be more reflective of sort of the general sentiment of the country. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, they all didn't shift by that much. I mean, Georgia really, it went from basically dead even in 2020 to Trump +2. And that's not really a shift that we would expect. So yeah. I think this is something that people are really going to dig into. There's a lot of questions about, did campaigns make a difference in this race? Did they matter at all? The Harris organization had a great ground game. There was lots of discussion about Trump's lack of ground game, the fact that he had outsourced it to a lot of people. It's very possible we could be looking at, a result where Harris did considerably worse in Wisconsin and Michigan, Pennsylvania, had she not spent the amount of money that she did on advertising. But, the closer results in Virginia and Minnesota sort of beg the question about the extent to which any of it really matters. I think it's not a question we can answer right now. I think it's going to be worthy of study. But one thing is for sure, money is not going anywhere in this political arena. I mean, the amount of money that was spent this cycle, so massive, and it may very well have bought a few of these seats right on the margin. And so I don't think anybody's going to view that as a poor investment in the long run.
Would you say that it's too soon to ask big questions about whether there's been kind of a change in either party's kind of governing coalition? or is that even on the table for discussion here? Is that worth thinking about?
Yeah, I don't even know if there would be any other way to describe it. I mean, I think we are seeing a fundamental reshaping of the electorate.
A minute ago you were talking about how the Harris team had a great field operation, but in the end it doesn't seem to have mattered. It's early, but moving forward, what role, if any, would you speculate that things like field programs should have? And if you can have, 100 field organizers in a state, which people claimed was the difference for someone like Obama in both '08 and in 12, does that matter? And I guess at the end of the day, my question is, what actually matters in getting votes?
Well, I'll tell you what I think mattered this cycle a lot, and we did touch on this as well last time I was here, is the just the varied types of media that people are consuming these days. That is such an underappreciated aspect of this campaign. Donald Trump and his allies really did a fantastic job on TikTok, on X. Obviously, they were aided by the CEO of the company being on their side, but in general, just had a very good presence on many of the social media outlets that people are using. That a lot of people, that's just how they get their information now. And I think whatever happens, with the conversation about money, the Democrats are going to have to figure out a way to come across more naturally with the demographic groups that they did not win, particularly males and white males and Latino men. And they're going to have to figure out what that looks like in terms of, making content. They're just berating people, and telling them that they did the right thing or the wrong thing for certain issues. It's just not going to do the trick.
But you don't think Jack Schlossberger or like Harry Sison were game changers for Kamala Harris?
No, it doesn't seem that way, does it? So I don't know. I am just a believer that the media landscape is really changing, and I say this obviously as somebody who's a member of the media and who's worked for an outlet that's been in operation for 40 years.
Yeah.
But I think people are just consuming news differently, and you have to adapt to that. You can't bury your head in the sand and hope and pray that that's just not going to be the case anymore when it's the way that this world is moving, and it's just not going to go back. It isn't going to go back. I mean, it's not like the internet's going anywhere, and AI is going to upend, most of what we know already. So there's going to have to be a discussion about digital as well as field on the Democratic side.
So before we move on to the future, which I know you're excited to talk about 2025, 2026, 2028, and all the elections until the three of us are old men in the nursing home, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the House, which I don't think has been called yet. Any projections on what's going to happen there?
Well, I'm not going to make a projection, but I will say that I do think Republicans will take it. We have a long way to go in the count. We're not going to get a formal call for a while. So I would just be prepared to wait days, if not a week or more, before California gets its results fully tabulated. Based on what we were seeing elsewhere in the country tonight, we don't really know what's left out in California. That's sort of the big question mark in the battle for House control. But I would expect that most of those districts where Democrats were competing, places like the Central Valley, Mike Garcia's district in the Los Angeles suburbs, Michelle Steele and Ken Calvert's seats are in Eastern LA. They're so diverse. It just doesn't strike me as the kind of electorate that would be ready or eager to oust Republican incumbents this cycle. It's possible that Kamala Harris does have some sort of home state advantage or effect that, it happens in presidential cycles. And she's been elected statewide there 3 times. So I can't say I would be surprised if that happens. But I think I would be surprised if Republicans don't take the House ultimately. I mean, I could see maybe 1 or 2 of those races falling to Democrats, maybe the 13th district, that's John Duarte's seat in the northern Central Valley. But it's hard to imagine an outcome where Republicans aren't in charge. If it'll be narrow, I mean, I want to be clear. It will be a narrow majority. It will be very tenuous. Nothing much will get done. There is not, and for that matter, nothing much will get done because of the fact that the Senate still has a filibuster. So, I mean, there really isn't much that gets done ever in Washington, as I'm sure you guys are well aware.
But I mean, surely we're
I
going to have appointees, get through the Senate faster than they have in the past. I mean, we now have an up and down vote on that, right? I mean, that's somewhat changed.
Yeah, I mean, that's not new necessarily, right? I mean, Biden did that, and Trump got that for the most part in his first 2 years. But Biden's Senate in the last 2 years, I mean, the Democratic Senate has largely just been confirming nominations for ambassadorships and judges occasionally when they have the desire. There's just, I'm sure the GOP will make a legislative push. I don't know what that looks like at this point. I'm not even going to try and pretend like I know what that looks like. Maybe they go after healthcare reform. I mean, it was sort of a pit in 2017 when they tried it, but I guess that could be priority number one. I'm sure they'll try immigration, and I could see, getting some Dem crossover support on that. But, I just don't envision a lot happening.
Were there any big surprises in the House? Things you didn't anticipate, or any winners who you thought?
It's early, so we don't have the full landscape yet. It looks like Don Bacon in Nebraska's 2nd District is going to survive. That was a race that we struggled with our rating on. We had it in toss-up all the way until the last week. We shifted it to lean Democrat because much of the private polling and public polling indicated that Bacon was probably the slight underdog in that race. But his allies always maintained if Kamala Harris was winning that district by anything less than 7 points, that they could be competitive there. Lo and behold, Kamala Harris won it by 7 points, and sure enough, he squeaked out a win. So Don Bacon is a force to be reckoned with. We have time and time again thought he was down and out, but he's got a good moderate reputation. He represents the city of Omaha and its immediate suburbs. He is a good fit for that seat. And Democrats, he is just their white whale. They cannot get Don Bacon's seat, even with Kamala Harris carrying it at the top of the ticket. So I would say that was one of the more surprising outcomes. I'm excited to see what happens in California. It does look like there could be some upsets brewing in the Central Valley. There's a Democrat named Jim Costa in California's Central Valley. He has Fresno. Looks like it's going to be closer than anticipated. So, and possibly California 47, which we had in lean Democrat. That's the open seat vacated by Katie Porter, who ran for the U.S. Senate. We thought that the Democrat there, Dave Min, was going to be the favorite. Scott Baugh, the Republican, is very much still in the hunt for that district. But no huge surprises. There have not been any earth-shattering upsets. There's no... I'm trying to think of even a good example from the last couple of, there's no Oklahoma 5 Kendra Horn winning in 2018 or, Maria Elvira Salazar flipping the Donna Shalala seat in 2020 in Miami. For the most part, all of these were within the bounds of what we expected.
I think it's funny. Our listeners should listen to an old episode when Kendra Horn cried on this show, pleading for Democrats to invest in places like Oklahoma because they were winnable. That was the past. Looking towards the future, how did Dems come back in 25, 26, and 28?
Well, I think a lot of the work for Democrats will honestly be done for them. I mean, we see time and time again, one of the oldest rules in politics, when you're the incumbent party, there's a backlash to you. That's going to happen with Trump. He'll start okay. His approval rating will be in the mid to high 40s, like it is for every president now. It'll go down. There will be a midterm backlash to him. And Democrats will probably retake the House, the Senate probably not, but we're going to, we'll see how it plays out. But in terms of long-term, bigger picture, I think Democrats are going to have to reckon with abortion not being the winning issue that they thought it was. They really, really ran on that in large part because The economy's not great. A lot of people felt like the economy was on the wrong track. And it wasn't a convincing enough message for people. Just abortion didn't seem to really convince people that they needed to vote for the Democratic Party up and down the ballot. So I don't know what the abortion tack looks like. It's probably still a winning issue for them, but I imagine that they lean into it less. And I expect it will be a lot of bread and butter issues. I expect it'll be a lot of discussion about, the economy, economic well-being, manufacturing. I'm sure a lot of positions on immigration that Democrats held during the first Trump presidency. I wouldn't be surprised if they're willing to sit down at the table and talk about a wall, which is sort of an unbelievable statement considering that was like the absolute no-go point of non-starter for them in the first 4 years of his presidency. So I think they will moderate a little bit. I think they have elements of their party that aren't going to want to do that. They're going to have to do their best to keep them in check and publicly signal that the leadership is not in line with those people. But I do think that they'll rebound. My feeling is if the GOP could get through the Great Depression, then Democrats will be able to get through this.
Well, I have to push back on that a little bit because, I just see a pattern of Democrats never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity at kind of reconciling differences between what their agenda is and what the prevailing views of the American people are. And I wonder, is there a chance, do you think that this might be the beginning of a 5 to 10 year wilderness in which the party kind of stubbornly refuses to deal with what has caused its own destruction, electorally at least? Is that a possibility, or am I, shooting a blank?
No, I think there will be some wilderness years here for sure. I have no idea what happens at who the party's standard bearer is at this point. I mean, it's obviously not going to be Harris, whose political career is probably done. I think there will be a concerted effort among Democratic leadership. I mean, the Democratic Party really, they're worrywarts, and they're also they don't trust their hearts like the Republicans. Republicans vote with their hearts. Democrats vote with their heads, and I think there will be a concerted push from leadership on making efforts to demonstrate that they're taking concerns about crime seriously. I think that played a role in why we saw some of these large cities shift toward Republicans. Immigration seriously. Yes, there are going to be Democrats who mess it up. Absolutely, that is going to happen. Some of them are going to come across very inauthentic. But I think that many of the conversations that they were having about immigration, cashless bail, a lot of these policies, they're going to be pretty toxic, and leadership's not, Democratic leadership isn't going to want to play ball with any of them. And I imagine if they come up for a vote in Congress, which, is the Republicans will put many of Democrats' worst talking points to votes and make Democrats vote on them, much like they did this cycle with immigration and Israel and another number of other issues. I imagine leadership will take a more active role in whipping their members to not express views that are contrary to what they're trying to demonstrate.
So final question, then you have to answer. Who's the front runner for 2028 on both sides?
Well, the 2028 Republican nomination, I can tell you, is J.D. Vance. That's easy. He will be the vice president, incumbent vice president. It's hard to win as a vice president. Kamala Harris knows this. Al Gore knows this. Al Gore knows it. Who else knows it? Hubert Humphrey. So it's not easy, but it happens. George H.W. Bush pulled it off. It's hard to see him not being the standard bearer unless he has some sort of epic catastrophe, personal crisis. The Dem side is easier. I mean, Democrats have a great bench, but it's hard to know who they're even willing to nominate. I mean, I think Josh Shapiro, who is probably the best candidate they could put forward. There is going to be considerable trepidation about nominating another woman, but Gretchen Whitmer is a proven overperformer in Michigan, and I think would carry that state. I think they really need to look at somebody who can carry a swing state. I don't think they should mess around with another blue state, safe state person. I think they should just Ruben Gallego, maybe senator-elect, or I don't know if he's senator-elect yet, but probably will be senator-elect from Arizona, who did very well with Latino men there, overperformed Trump, overperformed Harris there quite considerably with that group. So those are some names that come to mind at the top of my head, but we don't know. There's a lot of that. We're in an unpredictable place right now, and I think even most Democrats are willing to concede that.
All right, George, anything else on your end?
Nope, that's been really helpful as a perspective, and we're just so happy to continue the conversation.
For sure. Well, I look forward to connecting more with you guys in the future. We've got a big governor cycle coming up and big House again cycle. Very excited to discuss all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for the time. We'll have you on again very soon, especially when things ramp up in the new year. And thanks. Thanks again for joining, and tune in next time.